Hello and welcome to the Scramble. I'm your host, David Sarabian, and thank you for stopping by. Today we will discuss a current Supreme Court case about the death penalty after a botched execution in Oklahoma. Next we will discuss whether the word thug has become a racial slur. And finally, we will discuss the shutdown of Corinthian College and its implication for other for-profit colleges. Before we dive into our topics, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Ashkan Kupanjad, a graduating senior in accounting, Alex Velto, a graduating senior in political science, Jason Thompson, a graduate student in journalism and media studies, and last but certainly not least, Camelot Todd, a junior in journalism and media studies. Thank you all for being with us. The Supreme Court will rule on the case of Glossop v. Gross, which will test the constitutionality of the state's 3-drug lethal injection. The case was brought forward as a result of the botched execution of Clayton Lockett, who moaned and struggled after the drugs were administered. He finally died 43 minutes after the injections had started. To date, the Supreme Court has never struck down a form of execution as being unconstitutional. And the question is whether the 3-drug formula Oklahoma used is constitutional. Has this case arisen because of incompetence by the state of Oklahoma in enacting the death penalty, or the drugs themselves that were used? As Justice Breyer asked during oral arguments, are there truly any forms of execution that do not cause an unacceptable amount of pain and therefore violate the Eighth Amendment? What do you think, Alex?
Well, that kind of last question definitely hits the nail on the head. How do you draw a line between kind of a type of execution which doesn't violate like an abusive punishment? And I think that it's tough to draw the line because the drug that they're discussing gives off the appearance that you're not being harmed, and it kind of mutes your body's natural responses to pain. So the perception of those that may be watching the injection, oh, that guy's feeling great, he's going smoothly into the night. In reality, we don't know what's going on in his head, and I think that's where kind of the problem is. A firing squad more just is
Because it's a quicker death.
It's still getting shot a bunch.
I mean, it's painful, but it's still quicker. It's better than 43 minutes of suffering.
I mean, that's fair, but that's like, while that seems somewhat, I guess, rational, it also is arbitrary. It is in some distinction. So could you ever justify the death penalty, or is it always inhumane? I'm not really sure. I think that given the kind of oral arguments, it seems like the court might rule to limit it, but then again, it was only the Q&A session, and you can never really get much out of those talks.
Cam, what do you think?
Well, I think it's really interesting because the U.S., the federal system that uses a 3-part drug, their supplier has cut them off. They don't make the drug anymore. So what they have been doing is trying to find different suppliers, but you can't get it in Europe. I don't know if it was this batch, but a couple months ago, there was another case that was similar to this. And they got that batch from Mexico, and they had no way of knowing the contents of the drugs, and it was equally as awful as this execution. So it's just getting to the point where there's no way to execute someone using this method that the state can actually have control over.
So is there a more humane method? I know that they've discussed using nitrogen gas.
Ooh.
Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it. I just don't think that's humane at all. I don't think the death penalty is humane. Just as a person, I'm against the death penalty.
Ashkan, how do you feel? You're Persian. You have a different cultural viewpoint than
actually,
us that have been really raised in America.
As a person who is conservative, one of the conservative beliefs I disagree with is the death penalty. Mm-hmm. Because the death penalty is usually used in the southern states, but in my opinion, it's not really humanitarian. It doesn't really matter like what method we use, regardless of the method, in my opinion, is not really humanitarian, because I don't think anybody in this world is deserving of dying. I think...
Anybody?
Well, if you're very evil, yeah. But
you seem to have just
well, I could have contradicted, but
contradict yourself a little.
Okay, my point is though, if somebody murders someone in self-defense, or kills somebody on accidents, or hasn't killed like 50 people, I don't think they should be.
So is 50 people the threshold then?
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about dictators. I'm talking about usual people who just kill somebody with self-defense and stuff.
Well, of course, that's very understandable.
Yeah, that's very
It's
understandable.
self-defense.
I don't think we should use the death penalty on them.
I don't believe we are, but
So,
do that, Saddam
but
Hussein.
on a-
Well,
And Libya too, Gaddafi.
On another note, I just want to throw it out here that the death penalty costs more to enact than it would be for that prisoner to go to jail. For
jail,
but
life.
is that
exactly.
just because of appeals decision? Because there are
I-
appeals in the court system? Because it doesn't strike me as necessarily more expensive for somebody to live for 20 years than it would to just say hang them.
Ooh. Oh, you're going straight to hanging people now?
It's
yeah.
I mean,
it's one.
I
The
disagree.
Supreme Court has not ruled that any method is unconstitutional. Hanging, even hanging, firing squad, those are all things that could be used.
Well-
But states just haven't been using them. Utah is an example of a state that allows execution by firing squad, but they haven't used it in a few years.
well, it could be partly because of the appeals, but also just, I feel like those methods that you mentioned, the hanging, the firing squad, this three-part
That's
drug,
not humanitarian at all.
all of those methods violate the Eighth Amendment. You're not
Yeah.
sending someone off smoothly into
And-
the night. You're killing them in a very public way, and I just think it says something about our society that we're supposed to be the leaders of the world, but we're
Yeah,
the
exactly.
only Western country that actually allows the death penalty
Yeah,
to be
Well,
used against
you
their
brought up a
civilians.
good point, especially internationally, because there have been quite a few times when international delegations will come to the U.S. and they'll say, for all the liberties that you have, you're still the country that, as a human rights issue, has not banned the death penalty.
Well, in my opinion, the U.S. actually contradicts itself because it goes around and condemns like Middle Eastern countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, countries in that area, why they hang people,
Well, Saudi
And-
Arabia beheads people.
beheads people, and Iran does too, like sometimes,
Yeah.
but not as much as Saudi Arabia though. And it's very unfortunate for the U.S. that they use the death penalty actually,
What do you think, Jason?
because
Yeah, I think like Foucault,
That's-
I agree with you too. You know, it's kind of, we look at someone else's speck and then we don't look the plank in our own eye. And yeah, I just think that, you know, Foucault said, you know, that we used to have really gruesome punishments because the state didn't have that much control over people. But now the state has such control over people that we don't really need to have, we've outgrown, I think, and most of it's just based on race, who is getting the death penalty historically anyways, right? So I think we've outgrown it, and it's just not a good thing that you shouldn't kill people. You know,
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. If you're telling people not to kill people, and then you go and kill people,
it's
it doesn't-
morally not
I don't
right.
honestly know if that would be Foucault's conclusion. Just kind of based off what I've read about
Well,
Foucault.
go on.
It seems like he would kind of criticize the more kind of overarching structure of prisons, which seems to be the alternative. So there's still a form of like biopolitical control happening for people that are inside the prisons. Every aspect is controlled. So I think like there are a lot of things with the U.S. that make it so we're more prone to have there be homicides, which cause people to go to jail and have the death penalty. The massive amounts of guns that we have. There are very high prevalence of like interracial conflict. A lot of things make it so that there will be homicides and there will be a need. I mean,
For
it'll be a
justice
result
system.
Is it
of
increasing or going down?
So why don't we, instead of
rough.
killing people, why don't we try to resolve these issues, these interracial issues, these gun control issues? Why don't we actually, as a society, instead of saying this person killed someone, let's kill them, why don't we start looking at why this person killed them?
Right.
What life choices did
caused
they
the
have to
issue?
make?
Causes.
Why
Yeah.
why did
I
their
agree.
life go down this road, and how has is this a pattern with other inmates receiving the death penalty?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is we don't have a justice system that pursues rehabilitation. We have a justice system that incarcerates, uses them to produce. People in prison will make like license plates, solar panels. There's so much money off of prison and off of this forced labor that it doesn't make sense to rehabilitate.
So the consensus is death penalty is inherently wrong?
Yes.
Cam?
Yes.
Yes?
And I'm
It's
not for
a tough
prison.
question. That's
Alex
really
is a tough question. Ashkan, you?
I would say yes.
Jason?
No death penalty and no prisons.
Well, we have to move on. Recently, Mayor Rawlings Blake of Baltimore and President Obama referred to the Baltimore rioters as thugs. This has started a national discussion on whether it is now the new N-word. NFL player Richard Sherman has referred to it as the modern way to call somebody the N-word. Is Sherman right in his statement, or has the term just recently been used as an expression of frustration and anger, as Mayor Rawlings Blake has said? Cam, go ahead. Cam, you've got some strong views on this.
Oh, I mean, when you say the word thug, you have a very mental image of what you're talking about.
And what is that image?
Okay, Tupac. There it is. He had thug life tatted on his chest. So when you think of thug, you don't start and think of anyone who.
You only think of one race.
You only think of one race. You don't think of another. So I agree with Richard Sherman. He had a point that this word is being substituted to project an image of young black men in a negative way. So it's the media's way of not calling these people that inappropriate term, but still conjuring up that image.
But it's not the media. So far, it's been the president and the mayor of Baltimore, who are both African American.
I mean, that doesn't deny the fact. Just because someone's African American doesn't mean they can't practice racism against their race.
So the mayor of Baltimore and President
They
Obama
can
are
have-
racist?
No, you're mischaracterizing my argument.
Well, I'm clarifying.
Yeah, for sure.
They're partaking in a racist-
They can partake. Yeah, exactly. They can partake in a racist discourse, which still creates an image that people who hear that terminology have this ingrained belief in them, which perpetuates a racist cycle. I think that the problem is that when you look at the rioters in Baltimore and you call them thugs, but you look at the rioters after, say, X sports team loses or wins, you don't call them thugs, you call them hooligans. It's a choice of terminology which
Hooligans or fans that are
yeah,
rioting.
and it's the problem is that it's the way we kind of give meaning to the word thug and the way that it's used is akin to the use of the N-word. Not that it always means that, but just
It has that connotation attached to it.
What about you, Ashkan? What do you think?
This is a very difficult topic because the president and the mayor, who are both African American, use this word. So let's say if a white person used this word, we would have automatically assumed they are racist. However, other races can be racist. So we have this misconception that people that people who are not white are not racist. So Obama and the mayor of Baltimore using this word, it was, in my opinion, inappropriate because what they are referring to is basically young black men who are misinformed that not doing good
Well,
things.
so does that mean that is it the image that comes to mind that is what makes it racist, or has it just been the word that itself?
It's the image.
Because oftentimes the word thug has been used for a street criminal, regardless of ethnicity.
It's the image that comes to mind.
It's the image that's been constructed. I mean, if you look until, I would say the word, the connotation of the word started changing around the late 1980s when there was more street
There was
violence.
that massive bump in crime.
I mean, if you look at all the news coverage from there and how they refer to these riots and those massive bumps in crime, they stopped kind of referring, they started to refer to young black men as thugs. And I think that, especially people who grew up, millennials, grew up understanding that word has that image attached to it. So it's, even if the person saying it is African American, that connotation is still there, and that projects that image further.
I think that's a good point. Jason, what do you say?
Yeah, I think I agree with that too. But the thug is somebody who just who's just going around beating people over the head for no reason, right?
More like a street criminal.
Yeah,
right?
versus like a political activist, maybe, because you're seeing that all these people.
So are
I'm
these
black, all
rioters
people are
political
getting-
activists
Yeah,
when they're
because
stealing
they're
and
activating.
burning?
Yeah, they are. definitely, because sometimes riots and stuff makes changes. And if you are among a race that is traditionally been beaten, jailed, shot and stuff, and if you just sit there and take it your whole life, that'll probably just going to happen to you over and over again. But maybe they're trying to do something different, shake up the system. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it, but that's what's happening. They're not thugs just going on unprovoked attacks. There's definitely some provocation going on here, whether it is stop and frisk policies, all these, and whether just drug policies in general that have taken away people's rights for 50 years.
Alex, you seem to have some points on this.
Yeah, I kind of largely disagree. I mean, I'm sorry, largely agree with you in a sense that while the energy might be misguided and be doing something that isn't necessarily perceived as revolutionary and is
You're
also
referring to the riots
the
themselves.
riots themselves, the
I mean,
looting.
it's
It is understandable in the sense that this is a group of people that, because of the way society is structured, aren't able to voice their concerns in the same way someone who's been educated or has had the benefits of like white privilege or the benefits of a class society that lets them learn how to advocate. Some of them don't have that benefit, which is why the kind of energy is misguided. But it doesn't mean that their call is not the same. And it doesn't mean that it can't be directed towards a positive type of resolution.
The best way, okay, Martin Luther King, he protested for the rights and for civil rights.
Yes.
If President Obama called him a thug, would that is racist?
Well, Dr. King didn't do rioting. He
But he
made it
did.
a point that he would do peaceful demonstrations, albeit unlawfully if there was not a permit given.
It was unlawfully, right?
Yes.
So the fact is, these people the people who live in Baltimore have high unemployment rates, high high school dropout rates. This population of people have had very limited opportunities to learn about how to protest in a peaceful manner. And I thought this was interesting. I read an article about how church leaders and ministers from Baltimore are getting together with these rioters to teach them about how Martin Luther King actually protested and kind of moved the riots into that direction. But a lot of it is they're fighting for the same things, the right to be treated equal in this society. They just don't know how to do it in a peaceful manner. They're breaking the law, but they're breaking the law for a greater purpose.
Well, it seems we have to cut to break, but it seems like at least that there seems to be a better way to protest, and there seems to have been bad actions on many sides of this issue. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back soon.
No one chooses to get breast cancer. The only choice we have is how we will deal with it.
We were lucky. Before we were ever treated for breast cancer, we planned for life after breast cancer. We made the choice
that breast cancer would not take something away from us.
Unfortunately, not every woman knows her choices. And for the sake of all women across America, that has to change. And you can help make it happen. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons is supporting a bill that will help make sure women who are facing breast cancer surgery are told about all their options. It's called the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act.
Every woman has a right to plan for life after breast cancer.
But too many breast cancer patients are being left in the dark.
Help us bring this important issue to light. Call your member of Congress and ask them to support the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act.
I realized at that moment, these people really needed us. And I was going to make a difference, right here in my community.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
Every year, millions of young women try to change the skin they were born with and say they'd die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No.
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back. As we have previously discussed about lawsuits over for-profit colleges, Corinthian College has been shut down. It had well-known subsidiaries like Everest College and has become infamous for massive grade inflation and deceiving students on the quality of the degree they were to receive. If this is the beginning of the ending of for-profit colleges, or is the market finally correcting itself with this college's collapse?
These instances that were referenced are really bad. These colleges have been predatory in nature. They target people that are just out of the military, have loans, they target single mothers, they target people that can't really fend for themselves, take out a lot of loans, pay the school. That's why the issues have occurred.
I've seen a lot of these myself back east where I have family, and I'll watch the local news, and constantly, almost all hours of the day, it used to be at least, Everest College, Everest College, Everest College, Everest College. And you could obviously tell by the demographic that they were aiming for, at least in the area, because I'm from Maryland, poor black folk.
Well, I mean, but I don't think it's unique to for-profit colleges. I think that nonprofit colleges can be just as predatory. The label as for-profit versus nonprofit is largely irrelevant in the way that a university would function. So there is still a chance for an institution to license it or classify as a nonprofit and do the exact same things that Everest College is doing. So I don't think it's like unique to the for-profit era. And getting rid of for-profit colleges wouldn't really change it. There'd just be a new loophole, and now they'd get a tax break.
So is this a market correction or what?
No, it looks like a market correction, but the transition will be to nonprofits who do the same thing.
I have to agree with him. I think colleges tend to view poor people as a way to kind of, as a ticket to diversify, to label themselves for better grants. So you go after, even if you're a nonprofit, you say, we have so many people who are Hispanic, Black, Asian at our school, and we're so diverse, so we should get grants because of this diversity, because we encourage this. So it's the underlining theme here is we're going after these students not to help these students become better, but because we see them as dollar signs. And the only way to correct this kind of corruption in university and higher education is to educate the lower population on how to maintain and how to get a degree in a way that won't leave them with thousands of dollars of debt.
What do you think, Ashkan?
I agree with the two previous speakers because whenever I sometimes watch TV, there is always online about these online degrees
University
University of Phoenix, because their pitch is basically we will give you a degree quick. It's not like a traditional college, and their market is the people who are poor, who are out of college, who came out of the military, who don't have the money to pay, so they have to take thousands of dollars of loans. So these colleges don't really sympathy with these people. They just want to make quick money.
So they're dollar signs. They're like cattle, as Cam said.
Yeah. So it's basically a profit.
Jason, what do you think?
I got bad news. This is not just not-profit colleges. This is all colleges in general. UNLV, Harvard, all of them are going down, down, down. If you read John Honchul's book called something Rand, Science and the Generation of Knowledge, something like that, he talks about the social contract. During World War II, we were fighting Russia. We put a huge money into the universities, millions of dollars into the universities, right? And now that money's the university is like, what are we putting this money for? Universities are struggling to be viable right now. Research money is getting cut, and we might all be in the same boat as these nonprofits.
But
in the next fight, we might all be in debt and with no great education. Education has gone down.
Jason, you've brought up a good point that there is
Since classic
a
days.
lot more students going to college. I know that there have been recent articles about how the Ivy League schools, especially Stanford, have received their largest amount of applications lately. We have University of Phoenix, we have DeVry, we have all of these colleges coming up with these new students. Is this just really a growth, or what do you think, Cam?
Okay, well, I think we live in an age where everyone has to have some kind of higher education. It's becoming inevitable to compete in this job market without having some education beyond high school.
Everybody, even like farmers, painters, can they do apprenticeship type things or something?
As a farmer, you have to know what to plant,
Well,
which
you learn
season.
That from either older people. You don't need like a school to teach them. You learn, traditional methods. People have been growing food and we're not dead
the
now.
traditional methods, and then you have to be competitive, especially with
the traditional methods work better.
Especially as Alex
the other
knows,
kinds are federally subsidized.
As Alex knows with marginal thinking when it comes to economics, that if you make a mistake with how you fertilize your field, then that can cost you, especially if it's a large farm, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
We don't have enough food in the United States
But
to eat right now.
the whole point
that
is
whole system of
yes, Cam.
that you have to have some kind of education beyond just what you learn in high school. And I think more students are aware of this, but they're not aware of how to pursue it. So they look at these commercials and they say, okay, I'm poor, I'm a minority student. This college says that if I go to DeVry for 2.5 years, I will get a degree and I'll get a job right after in one of these big tech companies. They're not educated on the fact that that is a for-profit college that highly inflated their promises. No college says you get out of here with a job and a degree. It's you get a degree and then you have to find a job and hopefully you have the tools that will.
We only have time for one last comment. Who wants to take it real quick? Alex, final word?
I think all colleges do this. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Jason.
You can get yourself an internship.
Yeah.
Slavery.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas or topics you would like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also watch full episodes of The Scramble at unlv.tv. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us and we hope to see you next time.